Ever wonder what really makes a church tick? I mean, beyond like the sermons and the hymns and all that, there's this whole hidden world of, organization. Most of us never really see it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's actually amazing how much goes into building a community of faith. It's
Hmm.
really complex. Like today, we're going to take this deep dive into one of them, the Uniting Reformed Church in Southern Africa.
The URCSA, and you sent over their church manual. That thing's intense.
That's a lot, right? That's why this will be a good deep dive, though. We can really unpack everything. We'll see how this church actually works on the inside, from the inside out.
And a lot of churches, they've got these like really complex structures. The URCSA, definitely no exception. Different leaders, ministries, even like a whole system for if they disagree on stuff.
Yeah, and it all comes back to this thing. They have the integrated ministry model.
Hmm.
They started using it back in 2005. It's basically how they keep everything running smoothly. They put everything under two main categories: core ministries and supporting ministries.
Core ministries, that sounds pretty foundational, like the important stuff, right?
Exactly. It's all about their core mission. So first you've got proclamation and worship. That's
Mm.
basically everything to do with preaching, the sacraments, all their liturgical practices.
So like shaping how the members experience their faith?
Absolutely. And then there's the congregational ministry that one focuses on each member, like their spiritual growth and well-being, Sunday school, youth groups, counseling, things like that, to build a community.
Sounds like they really want their members to have this like well-rounded experience, spiritual needs on different levels.
Right. And then there's the service and witness ministry.
Yeah.
That one takes their whole community spirit outside the church walls.
Okay, now service and witness, that's interesting. What does that even look like in real life?
It's putting faith into action, but like really doing it.
Hmm.
Visiting people who are sick, helping older folks, even tackling bigger problems.
Yeah.
Poverty, injustice, those kinds of things.
Wow. So it's not just about what happens inside the church, it's about getting out there and actually making a difference in their community. That's really something.
And it's a huge part of who they are as a church. But to really understand how this all works, we got to look at how the URCSA is organized, because it's pretty unique.
Okay, so let's get into it, the structure. We're starting local, right?
Yeah, totally. The base of the URCSA is the local congregation. It's a group of people who believe the same things in a specific area.
And each one of these congregations, they have their own leaders, right?
Yeah, they have a church council. It's their governing body. They take care of the congregation's business finances, decisions about property, legal stuff, all of it.
So a lot of independence at the local level then.
Very decentralized,
Yeah.
which is interesting for a church this large. It means that each congregation, they have a really strong sense of ownership, like they're responsible.
Yeah, makes sense. They know their own communities better than anyone. But how do all these different groups connect with the larger church?
That's where presbyteries come in. So a few congregations that are geographically close, they'll form a presbytery, which is kind of like a regional governing body.
Like a district, almost.
Exactly. Each year, each congregation in the presbytery, they send people, usually a minister and an elder, to talk about issues that affect the whole presbytery.
So they're making decisions on a bigger scale than the local congregations would.
Yeah, things like coordinating those outreach programs we were talking about, figuring out resources for the region, even dealing with theological stuff or social issues that are relevant to the specific area.
Starting to sound like a political system or something.
Well, it's like that, kind of. Trying to find that balance between what the local groups can decide and what the higher-ups decide. But it doesn't stop there. Presbyteries, they come together too, and they form these regional synods.
Okay, getting bigger and bigger. So tell me about those. The regional synods, I mean.
They have 7 of them. Each one represents a different area. Like you've got the Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Namibia, you get the idea. And each synod, it's got its own leadership team. They're elected every 4 years, and they oversee everything going on.
What kind of things are they doing, mainly?
Their main thing is making sure that the URCSA's mission, what they're all about, is happening in their region, supporting the congregations, helping the presbyteries work together, addressing any big social issues in their area.
So they're really trying to make a difference at a regional level. But who's in charge overall? At the very top, I mean.
Yeah, that would be the General Synod. They're the ones making the final decisions in the URCSA.
The big bosses. So that's people from all 7 regions coming together, right?
Yep, it's a huge deal. Only happens every 4 years. They deal with stuff that affects the entire URCSA, changing the church order, making big decisions about their structure, where they're headed in the future, even how they'll respond to, world events.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility. It's kind of amazing how they can get all those different people with different opinions together to make decisions.
And remember, this whole structure, it's built on this idea of shared governance, that Presbyterian system we talked about earlier.
Meaning, for those of us who aren't experts on how churches are run, I mean.
It means that in the URCSA, it's not just one person calling all the shots, not like a bishop or a pope. Instead, they've got ordained ministers and then elders who are elected. And they all work together in these councils.
So it's more like everyone working together and making decisions jointly.
Exactly. And you see this emphasis on collaboration at every single level of their structure, from the smallest congregation all the way up to that general synod.
So it all ties back to that integrated ministry model, right? This idea of bringing everything and everyone together, unifying all their efforts.
You got it. But it's not just about the structure. It's also about changing those traditional roles you see in a church.
Okay, now that's interesting. How have those roles changed?
Well, think about church leadership. We usually picture the minister, right? The one giving sermons and providing spiritual guidance.
Right, the main person you think of when you picture a church.
Exactly. And the URCSA definitely values their ministers. They call them teaching elders. But their whole model is about making those other leadership roles important too.
Like, what other roles are there?
Well, you've got the managing elder, for one. The congregation elects these people, and they work directly with the teaching elder, but more on the admin side and the pastoral duties.
So they're making sure the church runs smoothly alongside the teaching elder. Sounds like a big job.
It is. And then you've got the deacon, which is a position that's traditionally been about helping the poor, those in need in the church community.
Right, helping others. That's a core part of many faiths.
And it's something the URCSA takes very seriously. But with this integrated ministry model, the role of the deacon has expanded. It's part of that bigger service and witness ministry we were talking about.
Ah, there's that connection again. It's all coming together. So instead of just focusing on the people inside the church, the deacon is now part of reaching out, engaging with the whole community.
Yeah, exactly. And that change, it shows how the URCSA is really committed to putting faith into action outside the church walls. It's a big part of who they are. You're getting it. That's a huge part of what makes the URCSA so interesting, you know? It's not just like about what's written in their rules. It's how they're actually out there engaging with everything around them.
And that's where those core ministries come in, right?
Right.
Proclamation and worship, congregational and service and witness. Those were the ones.
Exactly. Every single one of them is crucial to their mission. Think of them like pillars holding up everything the URCSA does.
Okay, I like that. So let's break those down one by one, starting with proclamation and worship. What makes that one so important?
That one's all about the core of what they believe. I'm talking preaching, the sacraments, their liturgical practices, all of that. It's what shapes the spiritual life of the congregation.
It's funny, when you think about it, we always associate churches with these traditions, these rituals, but most of us don't think about how they keep those going, you know?
It's like anything else. There's a ton of work that goes into it. Training, making sure the next generation learns it, upholding their practices. That's a lot of what the proclamation and worship ministry does.
Makes you appreciate it, right? It's not just showing up on Sunday.
Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if proclamation and worship is about the foundation, their foundation as a church, then you've got the congregational ministry. That one's about taking care of each person in that community.
Giving them that sense of belonging, support, all of that.
Exactly. Think of everything that brings people together. You know, Sunday school, they have it for all different ages, youth groups, men's and women's groups, even counseling for couples.
Wow. So it's about building relationships and helping people with their everyday struggles, but within that context of faith.
Yeah. And doing it all based on their shared values. They're trying to make a safe space for people to grow, both spiritually and personally.
It sounds like they've got all the bases covered.
They do. And then there's the service and witness ministry, which, like we said, takes all that care and support outside of the church.
And that witness part is so key for them, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say you believe something, but they're really out there living it.
Totally. It's about action. Whether it's visiting people who are sick, feeding people who are homeless, fighting for social justice, or even just being a good neighbor, those little things.
Really making a difference in people's lives.
Exactly. And that's deep in their Reformed tradition. It's all about making sure your life, how you live, actually reflects what you believe.
Walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Now, I know I keep going back to it, but this integrated ministry model, it's clearly a really big deal.
Oh, for sure. Because none of these core ministries, they can't just run on their own. They need people, money, a system for making decisions, all of that.
And that's where those supporting ministries come in, right? The behind-the-scenes stuff that makes it all happen.
Exactly. Yeah. They're like the stage crew for a big show. You don't see them, but they're the reason everything runs smoothly.
And they've got a whole team for each part of that, don't they? You were telling me about some of them earlier with those acronyms, like the SMFA. What does that one even stand for?
Supporting Ministry of Financial Administration. Basically, churches need to be smart with their money, right?
Hmm.
Just like any organization. But the URCSA, they want their congregations to have a say, so it gets kind of complicated.
Right, because each congregation is in charge of its own finances.
Exactly. So that's where SMFA comes in. They set the rules and keep an eye on things to make sure that money is being handled properly.
I can see why that's important, especially for a church. Nobody wants to see scandals about money, you know?
For sure. They help congregations make budgets, manage their resources, even deal with the legal stuff that comes with donations and everything. They also make sure that everything is audited and reported correctly.
Sounds like serious business.
Oh, it is. And then there's the Supporting Ministry of Judicial Matters, or SMJM. Might sound a little scary, but it's really important for keeping things harmonious, you know.
This is the church court one, right?
It's not that dramatic, but they do handle any disagreements or disciplinary problems that pop up.
So, like, if two members have a disagreement, the SMJM would try to help them work it out.
Exactly. They're like mediators. They want to help everyone come to a solution that's fair for everyone.
I wonder what kinds of situations they deal with.
Well, don't forget, each congregation has some freedom, right? So they might run into real legal issues with property, employment, or even problems with local laws, things like that. The SMGM helps them figure it all out.
So they're like the bridge between how the URCSA does things internally and how the rest of the world works.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And speaking of the real world, we can't forget the Supporting Ministry of Communication, Publications, and Archives, or SMPCA for short.
SMPCA, that's a mouthful. But communication is so important these days for every organization.
Especially one as big as the URCSA. And don't forget, they're spread out all over. So they need a way to keep everyone in the loop connected, you know?
So what are they doing, practically speaking? Newsletters, website stuff, what else?
All of that, definitely. But they also manage all the church's communication, internal and external. They publish official documents, even take care of the historical stuff, their archives.
So they're like the keepers of the URCSA's story, how it's evolved over time.
Yeah, and their job has gotten so much bigger with the internet and everything. They manage their website, social media, making sure their message gets out there.
It's crazy how much technology has changed how churches work. They have to keep up with the times, just like everyone else.
Absolutely. And the SMPCA, they're a big part of helping the URCSA do that.
This is all seriously impressive. But you mentioned one more, right? Something about ecumenical affairs, not a word you hear every day.
Right. That would be the Supporting Ministry of Ecumenical Affairs, or SMEA. Basically, they focus on building relationships with other Christian denominations.
So they're the ones building bridges between different branches of Christianity.
Exactly. It's about remembering what they have in common, working together on those shared issues. They organize things like interfaith dialogues, do projects together, or even team up to fight for social justice.
It's a good reminder that even within the same faith, people see things differently. But there's still that common ground, that potential to work together.
Exactly. That's what the SMEA is all about.
It's clear that the URCSA put tons of thought into how they do things, how to best support their members and achieve their goals. But what happens when something unexpected happens? Something that doesn't really fit into those ministries we talked about.
That's such a good question. And it takes us to something really interesting about how they're organized. So remember how we talked about those councils? At each level of the URCSA congregations, presbyteries, all the way up to the General Synod.
Right, like their own little decision-making bodies.
Exactly. Well, sometimes things happen that need to be dealt with, like right away. They can't wait for the next meeting, you know?
Yeah, makes sense. Life throws curveballs even in the church world. So what do? How do they handle those situations?
That's where these ad hoc committees come in.
Ad hoc, meaning?
It means they're formed for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
Basically, they create this temporary team to tackle that one issue.
So it's like a rapid response team for whatever's come up.
Exactly. And they can do this at any level, depending on what's going on. If it's just affecting one congregation, they can figure it out themselves. But if it's something bigger, something that involves multiple churches, maybe even the whole denomination, then they might form an ad hoc committee at the Presbytery or Synod level.
So they've got this balance, the structure, but then also the flexibility to deal with the unexpected. Pretty smart.
It really is. They're prepared for anything.
This whole deep dive has been fascinating. Honestly, I never knew how much went on behind the scenes at a church. It's really a lot to take in.
Right. It's easy to just, like, not think about it.
Hmm.
But when you see how much thought goes into it, how organized everything is,
Hmm.
it's impressive.
It really is. And you know what's funny? We've talked about their structure, all their ministries, how they make decisions, but we haven't even gotten into what they actually believe,
Yeah.
their specific doctrines and all that.
That's what I love about these deep dives. We get so caught up in the how that we forget about the why. But when we do understand the how something like the URCSA actually works, it gives you this whole other level of appreciation for what they stand for.
It's like we got this backstage pass to a whole new world, one we never really see. And to everyone listening, if this is what we can learn from just one church's manual, imagine what other fascinating stuff is out there just waiting to be discovered in all the different religions and faiths around the world.